Very clear.
All right.
Okay, Ed, I can let you.
Yeah. Arno, you should also give me permission to record this. Okay, I see we're recording. Great. So welcome everyone. So Erasme. Today we have Axel Dairut, who is the EU International Affairs Advisor for CITEO. And for those of you who don't know, CITEO is the company in charge of the extended producer responsibility schemes for household packaging and for graphic and printed paper in France. They're working with 20,000 packers and fillers, 900 local municipalities, and 300 recyclers. And their annual turnover is around 850 million euros. So they're quite a significant player on the market. Axel joined the Public Policy Affairs Department of CITEO in 2018 in high administration and as an advisor for the public sector. He works very closely with all the actors of the packaging value chain, in particular on issues related to the circular economy package, the European Plastics Strategy, the Circular Plastics Alliance, the National Pacts on Plastic Packaging, the new Circular Economy Action Plan within the European Green Deal, and EPR projects around the world. Axel is also a lecturer on circular economy and European affairs for the University of Paris and the International Business School. Today, Axel will talk about the current and future regulations and trends in the plastics world. So Axel, thank you again very much for joining us today and taking the time, and the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot to you for this invitation and this very interesting topic. I'm going to share my screen. Normally you're all able to see it. Yes, we're going to talk all together and exchange, so don't hesitate to interrupt me if you have any questions. I'm sure we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the conference, but even if you have a remark or suggestions or critique, don't hesitate to be really interactive, because sometimes it's not really interactive in such a format. So really don't hesitate to interrupt me. We're gonna talk about the regulations and trends in the plastic world. We're gonna have a focus at the international level, of course, and then I will give you some feedback about what is happening right now at the EU level with the European Commission and the member states. And then I will have a little focused on the French measures, because France is really in advance and would like to be the leader on the circular economy regulatory framework and on plastic measures. So we're going to talk also about that. As you perfectly explained, I'm from CITEO. Just to mention, that CITEO is a non-profit organization. So, you know, sometimes EPR are quite different between member states. It could be a profit organization, non-profit in a competitive or a non-competitive market. For the French market, so we have more than 15 EPR schemes. So mainly for batteries, lights, textiles, furnitures, and so on. So it's one EPR for each product. And sometimes EPR have a lot of products such as furnitures and beds and so on, for example, for ecomobilier. For us, it's two EPR schemes in one organization. So it's household packaging and graphic papers, as you mentioned. And we are a non-profit organization. And since last week, we are an on-purpose firm, which is a specific disposition of the French law to have an on-purpose statute with a general interest mission with concrete environmental and societal actions. Just some figures on plastics, just to, I'm sure you all know about the figures and what are the plastic soups and so on, but just to give you some figures to be sure that we have the same level of knowledge. Of course, the big pressure on plastics is in Asia and Pacific. As you know, we had the Chinese ban 2 years ago already, with the reactions of the European Commission to have the single-use plastic directive, which was a translation of the plastic strategy at the European level. We also had a debate on a plastic tax, and I will talk about it later, and also the port reception facilities directive, which is a specific regulations to be sure that we have a good management of the waste, including the plastic waste of the shipments. If we take a look of the global annual plastic productions in million tons, you can see that more than half of all the plastic ever produced have been made since the beginning of this century. So it's been 20 years, and it's majorly 56% of the productions of virgin plastics. And a focus of zero trash on plastic packaging at the EU level. And you can see that we have a big amount of plastic packaging production per inhabitant, specifically in Italy and Germany, but we are not also good in France with approximately between 20 and 29 kilo per inhabitant. The first step of this presentation for the regulatory framework, in my opinion, it's really the resolution that we had with the United Nations Environment last March in 2019, so last year, to have a good management of plastics, and also including plastic packaging and plastic products, of course, and single-use plastic products, by implementing an EPR scheme. So as CTO, but has a lot of EPR schemes across the world. So to be sure that we have producers, brand owners, and retailers that will manage the end life of the product by implementing an independent organizations, which will be in charge of the external producer responsibility. The external producer responsibility is an application of the polluter pays principle, which was recognized by the OECD in 1975. And as an example, the first EPR scheme in the world was in Germany for packaging. So it was in 1991. And then we had France in 1992 and so on everywhere in EU. And now, for example, for the packaging, it's mandatory to have an EPR schemes for all packaging, including, of course, the plastic packaging, by 2025 with the applications of the circular economy package at the EU level. The United Nations for Environment also published a report linked to these resolutions with the legal limits on single-use plastics and microplastics. It's very interesting and complete report because you have measures on EPR, fiscal measures, and also concrete bans in some member states of the UN. So it's quite complete to have an idea of all the policies that we have across the world on the single-use plastic. Other international dynamics, which was in Osaka specifically with the G20, to really have a better management of marine litter, of course, and also plastic protocols that was signed by France, and also all the member states of the G7 in Charleroi, Quebec, 2 years ago, with concrete targets of 100% of recyclable or reusable plastic by 2030, 50% of integrations of recycled plastic in 2030, reductions of microplastics in cosmetics. And for example, France really takes the lead of these measures because it was already implemented in 2016 with the biodiversity law. And now the European Commission would like to ban any international or non-international microplastics into products with the circular economy package, the new circular economy action plan, in fact. And also to take into account with this protocol with the G7, the impact of alternatives, of course. And we have concretely this exchange now with the European Commissions with the next chapters of the plastic strategy, and to think about what could be the alternatives, and to have in mind the life cycle analysis with biodiversity criteria, but also carbon criteria. It's really important to have the big pictures on the environmental impacts. And with these protocols, we have now translations in member states and countries of the G7. For example, Canada announced a plastic strategy, which is quite the same than the plastic strategy at the EU level, with new collection scheme, with new implementation of an EPR, with a deposit return system that will be largest than the one that we already have for the Canada. We also have debate on the states in the US, so to implement EPR schemes and to ban some plastic products, such in California, for example, and so on. I will talk about it later. And as you all know, because you are expert on this type of subjects, we also have the Basel Convention that came into force in 1992 and was mainly for the reductions of hazardous waste generations, the restrictions of transboundary movement of hazardous waste, and also to have a concrete and boundary regulatory system for transboundary movement. And the idea to really have a traceability of the waste, specifically the hazardous waste. And now, since last year, so since March 2019, so you see that we had really two chapters in the same time, the UNEP resolution in Nairobi and the Basel Convention in the March 2019. So we had a revision of the Basel Conventions, so to include plastic waste into the control regime for importations and exportations of waste for the parties of the Basel Convention. So it was held by the vast majority of the nations into the Basel Convention. And now at the EU level, for example, we are currently under consultations with the European Commission to have the revision of the regulations on waste shipments and to include the revision of the Basel Convention, so these amendments, and to concretely have the management of the secondary waste materials, but also the plastic waste into the internal markets, and to have a concrete traceability of the materials to be sure that at the end of the day, if it's exports in outside of the EU, it will not be landfilled. Specifically, if it's well collected within a selective collections scheme, it not has to be on landfill scheme, because it doesn't make any sense from the economic and environmental criteria and point of view. To go back to the international picture, so I already mentioned the G7 positions protocol, and just to give you the main translation that we had at the international level. So we had, as mentioned, a strategy on zero plastic that was passed in 2018 and is currently under implementations with regulation in the Canadian level. We have bans of some plastic bags, but also plastic products, single-use plastic packaging, for example, in California at the US level, and they are currently working on a law, specific law at the state levels to implement EPR scheme, as I mentioned. At the EU level, we had the circular economy package and the single-use plastics directive, and we'll talk about it later. At the Indian level, they are currently discussing about the implementation of EPR schemes, and also to have a better traceability of plastic waste, of course, and to increase the collections, of course, because we know that it's quite the big problems in undeveloping countries, is to have a better collections infrastructure and to include the informal economy into a new economy that could be the circular economy, of course, but by taking also this part of the economy and to be sure that we have a good level of the socials with social criteria and also environmental criteria, and we promote a circular economy by also taking into account the labor market. You also have the Chinese strategy, which was announced a few months ago. It was the beginning of 2020, the concrete one, I mean, because we know that we had the Chinese ban. So in 2017, that was under applications in 2018, and a proposal to ban single-use plastic by 2022, and now it goes further with the new strategy that was published at the beginning of this year. And also at the Australian level, so to have 100% of packaging to be recyclable, compostable, or reusable, of course. And we have a lot of plastic packs. We had one in South Africa. We had one in Chile. We had also one in US. And the EU just launched an European plastic pact in March. I will talk about it later. And under the EU, we also have plastic pact in Portugal, Poland, France, Netherlands, to really have a full visions of the recyclability of plastic products and to increase the recycled content while decreasing the use of virgin plastics. I don't know if you have any questions before to continue?
There is one question, Axel, from Emmanuel Bertrand, and he's asking, what is the EU plan with respect to the single use of plastics in the laboratories and in the pharmaceutical industry, such as single-use bioreactors?
It's a very precise one. I will talk about it later on the single-use plastic directive, but I can mention the fact that we have some exemption from medical products. It's a case, for example, for straw. It's a case, for example, for eco-design requirements on plastic bottles. For specifically your products, there isn't any measures on the restrictions, or recycled content, but we have to take into account, of course, the fact that now we have the COVID-19 crisis and we have more the use of single-use plastic products, and maybe they will take into account this increase of plastic waste into considerations for new regulations. For example, to implement an EPR schemes for single-use plastic mask, for example, or to decrease some medical plastic products if we have alternative. Because it's really it was really the beginning of the reflection at the European levels with the single-use plastic directive. It's okay, we need to decrease littering, we need to ban some plastic products, but if we are sure that we have alternative that are good from the environmental and economic point of view, and if we don't have any alternative, to have at least reductions and to have recycled content.
Thank you. And there's one more recent question. If you know regulations on microplastics.
Yes. So we at the international level or at the European level?
I think Arno, can you specify?
It is
if
international
it's EU level or international level?
Okay.
At international level, I'm not really aware of any changement of the regulation, and at the EU level, they would like to take the lead on this by having the stricter, if I could say, the stricter regulations on microplastics by banning any intentional and unintentional microplastic into new products with new regulations, and by a revision of the REACH, so the regulations on chemical products. And they have published at the end of October, so it's been 6 weeks, the sustainable strategy for on chemical products, and to have a better interactions and the same level of requirements between chemical products, eco-design, and the management of the secondary raw materials, and to be sure that we have the same level of requirements if we would like to have any recycled content, to avoid any microplastic that could damage the environment or the human health. So we have a roadmap with this sustainable chemical strategy, and we will have measures from 2021 to 2025. And the big chapter will be the revision of the REACH regulation.
That's great. Thank you, Axel. That's very exhaustive. And we have a new question, a very interesting one. If there are any studies that measure the impact of COVID on our plastic use, either in EU or internationally, do you know anything about it?
A study was published on the use of plastic products and the potentiality to be contaminated, but I think it's not your questions. It was published in the US, so it was in April. A study was also published on the trends about the use of packaging with the COVID situations, specifically with the increase of packaging waste due to the e-commerce stakeholders. And we didn't have any yet. Yes, no, there is one, sorry, because there are a lot of reports. Ellen MacArthur Foundations published, I think it was 3 weeks ago, a report on the COVID impact on plastic products here. and there is one with a specific focus on packaging. I can maybe share it after the webinar if you want.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. Thanks so much.
With pleasure. So following this this chapter that we have saw on the regulation at international level, we have more and more EPR schemes, specifically for packaging because it's my topic, but there are other products that are under EPR, and you know that a major part of plastic comes from packaging, but it also includes automotive sectors, electronic products, and also textile, of course. So it's interesting to see that more and more abroad, we have reflections to implement EPR schemes. And the last figure were 2 years ago, but since 2018, a lot of change have been. We saw a lot of change and also a lot of regulations and discussion at the national level. Regarding the European regulations, so maybe you heard about it, of course, within this year, but we have the EU circular economy package that was under discussions a few years ago and was really applicable with the regulations just 2 years ago. So it was really under the official journal of the EU in July 2018. With the Waste Framework Directive, with specific measures on municipal waste, on bio-waste, on recycling targets per material. We had also the Landfill Directive, which really is the applications of the hierarchy on waste, so really to reduce, reuse, recycle, the energy recovery, and then the landfilling. And the idea with the Waste Framework Directive and the Landfill Directive is that it's not possible anymore to landfill any waste that has been sorted. So it's really concrete, and we need now to be sure of the implementation of such a measure under the municipal collection scheme of waste, and also with all the EPR schemes and with all private organizations and stakeholders, specifically when we have collections on the go. So outside of the household, because really the challenge now. We also have the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive. We're not going too much into details on that because it could be technical and maybe boring. And we have the Waste Incineration Directive, which is also the link with the waste hierarchy. And specifically on targeted policies, we have the Plastic Bag Directive. You all know about that. The Single-Use Plastic Directive, I will talk about it later, and the Waste to Energy Directive. Specifically on the Single-Use Plastic Directive, which is the translation of the European Plastic Strategy. So in the EU bubble, we say the SUP Directive. So as explained, it's a translation of the European Plastic Strategy, and based on the improvement of economy and quality of plastic recycling, the curve of plastic waste and littering, and also to drive investment and innovations, and to be sure that we completely reduce the amount of littering while giving really value on secondary raw materials, and to have competitivity between virgin plastic use and secondary plastics materials. So you all know that it was under big debate at the European level 2 years ago. It was the proposal was published in May 2018, and the negotiations were almost done 10 months after. So it was approximately in February 2019. And why? Because we had a lot of a big pressure, a big political pressure, thanks to the European elections that we had after in May. And the idea was really to finish the negotiations of this Single-Use Plastic Directive and to show to European citizens that we had concrete measures on the reductions of plastics. And also because the EU wanted to have the lead on the plastic measures at the international level. And the main goal of this directive and this strategy was really to avoid and to decrease the marine litters, because we have health concerns, of course. Degradations of marine ecosystem. It's really also the big challenge now, is to have a concrete measures on the LCA, so the life cycle analysis of plastic products, by taking into account carbon footprint, biodiversity footprint, and the biodiversity footprint is really missing because we don't have any data on the littering. We don't have any concrete data on the alternatives from the biodiversity point of view between plastic and other materials. And we know that with the extractions of materials, it could be quite important. If we take aluminium or if we take petrochemical sources or bio-based sources. And I think we really need to have, if we would like to reach the target that we have in 2025 and 2030 at the European level, we need to have the big pictures on the impact from the biodiversity point of view and the carbon point of view. We also have, as you know, with all the figures that we already all know on the fish and plastics, we have a big impact on fisheries and aquaculture. And we have impact on tourism and coastal communities. If we measures from the economic point of view, the externalities, the negative externalities on marine litters on these activities is quite a lot. It's 630 million euros. It's approximately the same amount of for the EPR schemes for packaging and all packaging in France. So it's quite a lot. And we have 4 pillars for this European plastic strategy. So as mentioned, to improve the economic and quality of plastic recycling, and with a concrete target on plastic packaging that needs to be reusable or recyclable by 2030. To boost the market for recycled plastics, and you know that it's really hard because the virgin plastics are much cheaper abroad and outside of EU, so it's better for industries to have plastics from Asia than from Europe, of course. And we need also to work on food grade certifications, specifically for packaging, for example. And we need to really have pledge and commitments from brand owners to reduce the use of virgin plastic, but also to increase recycling content while having such works with public authorities on the food grade certification and on concrete targets with, once again, a concrete LCA analysis on the biodiversity and carbon footprint. We also had actions on SUP, so single-use plastic products, with a ban of 10 single-use plastic products, such as straw and so on. We had also, the idea was to have also measures on microplastics, but as explained, it will be now with the new circular economy action plan and with the sustainable strategy on chemical products. Also measures on oxo-degradable plastics, because we all know that it's not a good solution from the economical and environmental point of view. So the European Commission decided to ban the oxo-degradable plastic use. And also measures, as explained at the beginning of this webinar, on the port reception facilities, and to include the waste the shipments into the circular economy by asking a fee for the management of the plastic waste. And the next chapter now will be regulations on the waste shipment, thanks to the amendment of the Basel Convention, as explained at the beginning. We also had funds for the plastic strategy. We'll talk about it later, but the European Court of Auditors published a report 2 months ago about the assessment of the European policies on plastic, and say that we just used 30% of the EU funds on waste management. So it's really underused. We all know that. And we have a good funding opportunities specifically to reach the targets that we have for the plastic strategy. So we really need to take the lead for industries and brand owners. And also the idea to support bilateral and multilateral initiatives on plastics. And for example, EU works in connections with China, for example. I had the opportunity last year to go with the European Commission in China, just before the COVID crisis. to explain what was concretely the single-use plastic strategy and directive, and how to implement an EPR scheme, and how to implement an eco-modulation, which is a bonus-malus system for the contributions and brand owners, and so on. So about the single-use directive, here we are. So as explained, it was almost done for the negotiations in February 2019, and we had the last trilogue. So the trilogue, it's the discussions between the ENVI committee of the European Parliament for this directive, the Council of the EU and the European Commissions to really have an agreement on all dispositions of the directive. So finally, we had publications of the directive in June 2019 with 3 concrete objectives. So to prevent, reduce the impact of plastic products, so exactly the plastic strategy, to promote the transitions to a circular economy, and to have an efficient functionment of the internal market. And this one is really important because from the political point of view, we had a lot of pressure to have this directive. It was adopted really fastly, so in 10 months. And now we have quite a problem for the implementations of this directive because there is also a lot of technical issues. And the European Commission announced officially last week that we have some delay regarding the implementing acts of the single-use plastic directive, and specifically for the definition of the single-use plastic products, because we need to take into account the single-use, the plastics. So what does it mean, plastic? Is it bio-based, or is it only chemical functions of the plastic? How do you conceive a product that is 100% with recycled plastics? Is it like a single use, or is it not a single use? Of course, it's not. It's a single use plastic. And also to have a distinctions between the single use and the reusable plastic products. So we have a lot of discussions with the European Commission, and as explained, we have now a delay on this implementing act. And we had also measures on auto-degradable plastics, as mentioned, and on marine litters. To just explain you in a few words the jungles that we have at the European level on plastic files. We have the yellow part, it's the multi-financial framework. So it's the EU recovery plan. We have a specific budget for the functionment of the EU. And there is a new own resources under this budget, which is really an innovative tool. So it's not a fiscal tool, so it means that we don't have the same measures at European level, but we need to base the new resources at the national levels with the same methodology. And after, with the subsidiarity principle, every member states have the liberty, the freedom, and the opportunity to implement the measures and to contribute at the same level of others, but based on a specific methodology. And this one is the non-recycled plastic packaging. So member states need to contribute to the EU budget based on the non-recycled plastic packaging, and it's 80 cents of euros per kilo. So it's quite a lot. For example, for the French market, it's approximately 19 euros per inhabitant. And after we take a look of all the files, but I will not go into much details because we could have 5 hours of webinar to discuss on this. But we have this new circular economy action, and I will talk about it later. We have a specific report that could also be interesting for you, which is a report at the European Parliament, the blue one. So the scientific report on plastic packaging for the PETI committee, which is a committee of petitions, because we had a lot of petitions from European citizens since 2 years on plastics, and also a lot of citizens' pressure and consumer pressure, because they said that the single-use plastic directive was not enough. And after, to come back to the yellow part, so just at the bottom of this slide, we also have the report that I've mentioned that was published a few weeks ago from the European Court of Auditors on the EU actions to tackle the issue of plastics. So what is the new circular economy action plan for the European Commission? So as you know, we had the Green Deal with the new the new president of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. And so it's been 1 year that we had the publication of the Green Deal, with concrete actions on energy, on the farm-to-fork sector, on biodiversity, on industries, and so on, and with transversal measures on the circular economy, with a new EU Circular Economy Action Plan that would like to go further than the package that we had before. So as explained, we had the circular economy, the new first action plan that was in 2015, with publications of the circular economy package in 2018. Now we would like to go further at the EU level with the new circular economy action plan. So it's a circular economy action plan 2.0 with new actions specifically on textile. We know that we have a lot of plastics on textiles, on electronic products, and specifically to have a right to repair and to reduce the use of plastics. And also, of course, once again, on plastics. So this is why we had the sustainable strategy on chemical products. This is why we have these measures on the EU recovery plan. So it's really the second chapter of the plastic strategy. And what is interesting is that now we have a link and concrete links between the biodiversity strategy and the circular economy action plan. So really to have the transversal visions of the environmental impact. And we also have links between the industrial strategy and the new circular economy action plan. So really to promote the commitments of industries and to include them, all the stakeholders of the value chains on plastic and all wastes to promote the circular economy. And what is specifically the measures on plastics within the new circular economy action plan? So it will be the most challenging one, is to have monetary requirements on recycled content. So we had with the single-use plastic directive, recycled content for plastic bottles. So it's 25% by 2025, sorry. And now they would like to go further. So not only on plastic packaging, but also on plastic products. So this is why they also have the revisions of the REACH regulation and on microplastics, as we mentioned before. And we need to have the same level of requirements and to be sure that we could really promote recycled content. But by promoting recycled content, we need also to be sure that we have a really competitive market for virgin plastic use and secondary plastics. This is why we have the EU recovery plan with these measures on plastic packaging, but it's not enough because plastic is not only packaging. And we will have in 2023, maybe, we hope so, a carbon adjustment, which is quite important because if we would like to import any virgin materials, we will have incentives with a malus from the carbon footprint by importing such materials. So from the circular economy perspective, it's quite interesting because we have a lot of measures to promote the circular economy within the internal markets, but we all know that it's still linear because we have the importations of raw materials. So we need also to be sure of the frontiers of the EU and the incentives to be sure we really have a fee for the brand owners, for industries, to include recycled content and to decrease the use of virgin plastics. I saw that there are some questions.
Yes, there's a question from Vincent, and he asks, do you think it would be possible to implement a kind of circular economy footprint like it exists for the carbon one in the EU now?
From my personal point of view, I hope so. For my professional point of view, I think it's quite complicated because we don't have like a transversal visions of all the regulations now to implement such a tool and criteria. But I hope so with the new circular economy action plan, and specifically with the carbon adjustment measures under the EU recovery plan. And I hope that they will also take into account circular economy criteria and footprint within this carbon adjustment to really have the same level of requirements while having the same visions on circular economy. But to give you the example, on LCA, we don't have any biodiversity criteria except the use of water, but it's not enough for the eco-design of packaging, for example. And if you would like to promote a concrete LCA with biodiversity criteria, we also need to take into account the extractions and also the potentiality of packaging to be littered. So it's only for packaging. So if we have this type of criteria in the coming years, I hope that at the end of the process, we will have all criteria from the circular economy point of view for all products, but it will not be for tomorrow. But in one day, we hope so.
Yeah. And there's another question from Claude Gilles, but maybe Claude, you can detail which funds you were talking about.
Yes, it's related to one of your slides, which were related with quantitative assessment of different effects. I have it is perhaps on slide 15 or something like that. You mentioned a fishing gear effect of about 27%. I didn't understand this feature. Yes, this is this one.
This one.
Just before. Yeah, this one. Okay.
Fishing gear. Yeah, it's the fact that the marinators is mostly from the top 10 single-use plastic products, which is for the consumptions, and fishing gear. And this is why now, so it's 27% of the marinators that comes from fishing gear. And this is why they are implementing an EPR schemes across Europe for fishing gear.
Yes, okay.
And for your other questions about the underuse of the funds, I will talk about it just later on the report of the European Court of Auditors. But it's specifically for the H2 2020 and the LIFE program. And I don't have the reason, but I imagine it's because the access of the informations and the times that we need to have files for applications for the EU funds and to follow the well applications of the EU funds. I know that it's quite a lot, and we need to have a dedicated persons to follow such files, and sometimes it's a burden for firms to apply to such a funds. But I know it's a shame because it's really a good levy of actions.
I have a last question about I just sent it before you speak, about the average values that you mentioned, because all the features you are giving here are related, and it's quite normal to average values. But are there some concentration effects, or some part of the planet which are particularly crowded and polluted, I should say, and where the regulations and the actions could be particularly efficient? You see my question?
I don't clearly understand. You mean what is the best regulations in another part of the world?
It's not the question. Where all the values you are giving here are average value on to Europe, or average value on Earth. Mm. But if you are concentrating the action and the regulation on some part of the world, namely the parts which are more crowded, such as China or India, by example, or Northern Europe, and so on, would the regulation and the action be particularly efficient or not? Because if the pollution and easy effect are particularly concentrated in some parts, it could be more easy. It could be easier to act on these parts than an average.
Yeah, you're totally right, huh? And I think it's really the last point of my presentation. This is why you have industries and NGO that calls for the specific treaty on plastic pollutions that could be mandatory, and then by the applications of this treaty to have specific local and regional regulations. But it takes time. If I take the example of Vietnam, for example, we didn't have any EPR schemes, and we know that it's quite an efficient tool to improve the collections of plastics products. And it's because industries made the commitment to put in place an APR scheme, and the Ministry of Environment work on it. So sometimes the chicken and the egg problem. So we really had to have a monetary measure, in my opinion, at the international level, and then have applications at the local level, but also to have the industry's commitment. And sometimes they don't want to because it's not economically valuable. So we need the same level of requirements for public authorities and industries. But yeah, of course, I'm totally in line with what you said.
You see what I see. You know, if you have an average constraint or cost by kilo of plastic, by example, these kind of things, without any proportionality to the quantity, the effect will be only average. But if it is more concentrated on some part, it's not the same.
Yeah, exactly. Really good point.
This is just a question of overall regulation. You know?
Yeah, it's not funny, but in fact, one of my students said exactly the same thing 3 weeks ago, and he gave me the figures, and I don't remember. For example, about the exportations, the price for the exportations of plastic waste in EU and abroad, and what is exactly the price if it's well managed at the EU level.
Yeah.
And it's really a concrete example of what you said, like it's really the problems with some price incentives of local regulations.
Yeah.
If we don't have any the global picture. Yeah.
Yes, this is always local versus average and complete. Yes. Yes.
Definitely.
This is a very big difference with CO2, by example, or carbon footprint, by example, because carbon is immediately homogeneous onto the atmosphere within days, so you cannot do anything. But for this kind of things,
it's concrete.
You
can
and
it's concrete for carbon.
So this is difference in the approach that could be explored.
Yeah, you have some. It's not regulations, but you have some indicators, and that was thought by some consultancy firms and NGOs about plastic leak and what could be the indicators between some regional, some regions, and some geographical zones. And it's quite interesting to see the impact at the local level.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks for these questions. Yeah, maybe I will go quickly because I think it's almost finished, but just to underline that the fact that we have also the European Parliament that is working on a report on the EU Circular Economy Action Plan. So it's an old report, so it's not mandatory, but it gives you the opinion of the MEP, so the member of the European Parliament. And they ask for fiscal tool to accelerate the competitiveness of materials within the internal market, to also have reductions of half of the single-use plastic packaging, to reduce over packaging, so it's related to packaging, of course, but on plastic specifically, and to promote deposit refund system, so such as in Germany. You have this famous, if you could say, plastic tax, but it's not really a plastic tax, it's the own resources on plastic packaging at the European level. So as explained, the member states have the freedom and the opportunity to implement measures, but whatever the measures, but the goal is really to contribute with the same methodology. So it could be on carbon, it could be a general budget, whatever. The French government decided it will be a general budget, so it's not a new tax. But for example, the Italian government already implemented a plastic tax. So it was under the financial law for this year, but it was postponed for next year due to the COVID situation. And for Italy, it's a tax of 35 cents of euros per kilo of virgin plastic use. So it's quite interesting because it's not only focused on packaging, but mainly on plastics and with virgin plastic use. And by having such measures, it's also taking into account the importations. The Spanish government proposed a tax of 45 cents of euros, but on on non-reusable packaging. So it's only on packaging. And UK proposed a specific tax on the non-recycled content of 30% in new single-use plastic products. So it's quite different. It's the main problem now with own resources is that we have different translations at the national levels, and it's not very clear for the industries to understand what is the vision on plastics. If it's a reduction of virgin plastic use, if it's an increase of recycled content. And in my point of view, as an Euro-optimist, I think that we have missed this opportunity to have the same level of requirement on plastics with fiscal concrete measures. But we know that it's quite complicated because we need the unanimity under the European Council. But since it's a new own resources and we will have other resources specifically on financial services and on GAFA, this one is a concrete example of what are the main obstacles and problems with the transpositions at the national level. So I think that really with the new circular economy action plan, we will also need to have, if you could say, an harmonization of such measures to be sure that we go in the good directions. And in my point of view, but it's really personal, I think the Italian measure is quite good because it's specifically on virgin plastic use. It's all for all plastic use, so not only on packaging specifically, and it takes into account importations. To give you some feedback about the European Court of Auditors report that was specifically on plastic waste. So it was published a few weeks ago, as mentioned. And the auditors said that we will not reach the targets that we have under the plastic strategy by 2025 and 2030. So we have missed the opportunity to really implement the regulations and to reach the target. So we need to go further, specifically with the new circular economy action plan. That we will need to implement correctly the amendment of the Basel Convention, but that we could have also, by implementing the amendment, an increase of waste acquired and illegal shipment. And Interpol, so I didn't mention this point, but Interpol published in August a specific report on the criminality of illegal shipment, specifically on plastic. And also we have a new calculation methodologies specifically for packaging, and we know that at the European level, the recycling performance will decrease with the new methodology. So it will not be really the case for the French market, but for some member states, such as, for example, Germany, the figures will decrease because we didn't have before the same methodologies. It was 4 methodologies. Now it will be the same one, and we will have in 2022 the same level of methodologies with the data from this year. Also, the auditors explained that national member states missed the opportunity to implement a deposit system, specifically such as Germany. And it's quite a shame because we will not reach the target that we have under the Single-Use Plastic Directive. And for now, no any member states will reach the target that we have for the collection of plastic bottles. And if you take a look of other member states, such as other countries that are outside of EU, if you take a look of Norwegia, for example, they have implemented an EPR and a deposit return system, and they have already reached the European target that we have at the EU level. Also, the auditors underline the lack of data and traceability also, and the fact that we could improve EPR system specifically for the eco-modulations, which is a bonus-malus system on the contributions of brand owners to the EPR. I really go quickly, but we have the Circular Plastic Alliance with the goals to have 10 million tons of recycled plastic into a new product by 2035. So it includes packaging, electronic equipment, agriculture, automotive, building and constructions. And we will have the General Assembly from the European Commission on this alliance tomorrow morning. We also have, for the first anniversary, we also have National Pact on Plastics, specifically with the plastic packaging focus. I'm not going into much details, you will have access to the slide. And we also have the European Plastic Pact, which is a coordination of all the national plastic pacts, and with the idea to have an harmonized vision of recycled content, the reductions of virgin plastic use, and the recyclability, because as you know, we don't have the same definitions of what is a recyclability, and sometimes what is a recyclat, which is a notion in Germany about the recycled content, for example, and to have the same level of requirement and definitions to be sure that at the end of the day, we have an efficient internal market and efficient policies on plastics. As Anne mentioned also, we have this scientific report from the European Parliament. So that was asked by the European Parliament from the Petty Committee, which is the Petitions Committee. And as a reminder, we had 41 petitions related to plastics from the European citizens. So we really see that there is a citizens' pressure, there is a regulatory pressure, and we really not need to go further. So we have all these measures at European level on the left side, and to the right side, you have what are concretely the translations at the national levels with the French case, for example. So we had a pact on plastic packaging, a specific new law that is the most innovative law on circular economy in the world, seriously, and a national strategy on plastics that is currently under discussions with the 3R decree. And I will finish my presentations with this slide, and as explained just before, we have a call for actions from NGOs and companies to really have a treaty on plastic pollutions to be sure of the standards of objective on the monetary methodologies, and also on the finance to support infrastructure development, and to have the same level of requirements, and after to have a concrete transposition at the local level, and to have the same level of pressure of regulations. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Don't see that if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. A really, really good presentation and very engaging at the same time. Also, if we value from all the questions you had in the chat. And talking about questions, there is a question from Arnaud, and he was asking if there's any research or reports that you're aware of on plastic issues and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals targets.
Not in my mind, no, I don't think so. Related specifically to SDG, no, I don't think so.
Okay. I had a question because you talked about the multi-annual financial framework, and I was wondering if you're aware about any component in the EU recovery plan, the next generation EU, that would kind of tackle the plastic issue.
Yes, we have a new call for tenders and proposal for the EU funds within the Green Deal and the new version of the Age 2020 program and the LIFE program. And there is under this program a specific fund for alternative on plastics. And for example, I was helping a startup from Chile that would like to implement in his solutions in the French market, and it's on reusable packaging, for example, and refillables that is not plastic, and it could be an opportunity for him to apply for such a fund, for example.
Okay.
And for your information, also, we, as for CTO, so I take my hat from CTO, we have the Circular Challenge, which is a competition of startup. And we have the award ceremony just.
Okay. What time?
5:30 French time zone, and we will have Danone startups that already won last year, and we have 10th finalists under the competitions. I will present the solutions so during the ceremony.
Is there a Zoom link on your website or somewhere?
Yeah, there is a link. I can share it to you on the chat.
That would be perfect, yeah. And
oh, great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Axel. We're running out of time, but I think I have one last question, a quick one. And you mentioned waste shipments from the EU and I was wondering, with the current strategies and talking about shipments outside of the EU and the criminality report you mentioned from the Interpol, do you see a potential problem with waste dumping in places outside the EU?
I didn't understand your question, sorry.
If you see a potential problem with plastic waste dumping outside of the EU that would result from the implementation of some of the European strategies that we have now.
Yes, of course, and specifically because we have the lack of traceability and transparency of the process. I think we have such a consequences here. Plastic dumping, and specifically because now it's a writing procedure within the Basel Conventions and the Waste Treatment Directive, and they would like to have an online traceability program. And I think it's one concrete tool to avoid such a problems here.
Yeah, that's a good initiative, actually.
I've just shared to you the Interpol report. Sorry, I didn't mention it on one of the slides, but as you can see, even in 1 hour, it's quite complicated to explain all the plastic regulations.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think you did a really good job, Axel. And thank you so much again for taking the time to be here and for a fantastic presentation. Thank you for the links. And with that, I think we can end here. And I hope
thanks a lot to you for this kind of exchange. It was really interesting also. And don't hesitate, if you have any questions, you can send me an email. It's at the end of the presentations. And I'm sure Arnaud will share the presentations he's already had.
Yeah, I can share your PDF, Axel.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
It's open knowledge for everyone. It's a circular economy process.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. I will share the document to everyone on the website of Erasme, and I can send it to you. Thanks, Axel, for this presentation. And I should ask, and maybe add, this is the last circular economy webinar from the year. So we will see each other in January. If I just see my planning, it should be the second week of January, so Thursday 14. And we should have another presentation about plastic, but connected to the Baltic Sea, because there is a many question about this area over there. So Margareta and Pinar, who manage a Replan project, should present some result. So I hope to see you in January, and maybe I'm going to tell you, have a nice end of yours. Hope with your family and everyone, if it's possible. And enjoy this time, and I see you on next year, 2021.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. If you can turn off your video, we can just say bye-bye to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks, Axel.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Bye, Arnaud.